Mr. Kevin Owocki, welcome to Mint. How are you doing, my friend? Thank you for being on.
Hey, hey, hey. Thanks for having
Hey,
me,
hey,
Adam. Great to be here.
hey. I love it, man. It's good to have you here. You're doing some really cool stuff in the space, and I'm really
Mhm.
glad for you to be a part of season four and share all the good things that's happening at Gitcoin. So, without further ado, let's just dive right in. Okay,
Let's do
let's
it.
start with
Yeah.
a quick intro. Who are you, Kevin? What does the world need to know about you? But I'm particularly curious. How'd you get your start in crypto?
Sure. Yeah. Who are you is a loaded question, right? Because we're all
Yes,
doing digital identity and it's multidimensional, right? But
exactly.
what's relevant to your audience is that I founded Gitcoin, which is a place that you can get coins if you're a software engineer or a designer or increasingly many other types of things. And I got my start in crypto in really like 2013, 2014, started building little side projects and just messing around with what was possible on Bitcoin and then later on Ethereum. And Gitcoin was like my sixth side project that I worked on. In 2017, I'd say that crypto shifted from like people who are hobbyists into something you could actually make a career out of.
Yeah.
And so Gitcoin was kind of my launch pad into the ecosystem as actually building an internet of jobs type application. So yeah, just have always been interested with the idea of networked money and programmable money and the internet of money, and was just systematically exploring ideas until I landed on Gitcoin, and that was the one.
So you talked about having six other hobbies that you were building towards. What were the other six, if you remember?
Yeah. Basically, I got my start in tech. I mean, I have a computer science degree from Delaware, 2006, and went in corporate America for 2 years, and I fucking hated every second of it. And I really wanted a way out. The way out that I found was being the CTO of an online dating website that went through TechStars, which is like an entrepreneur accelerator, like of akin of Y Combinator.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was quite an adventure. We raised our Series A the week that Lehman Brothers collapsed.
Oh,
And
nice. Amazing.
yeah, but anyway, like the TLDR is like been a Web 2 entrepreneur for like 10 years and
Okay.
have just like kind of seen a lot of shit because of that. And one of the things that I learned was that it's funner to be in frontier tech than it is to be like climbing the corporate ladder at some like old state corporation. So I was the organizer of the Boulder Startup Weeks. Boulder Startup Week is this 1 week celebration of entrepreneurship and technology every May in Boulder, Colorado. And it's kind of like one part hippie, one part technology, one part entrepreneurship, given that it's Boulder, Colorado, which is all of those things. And
Right.
I was running like the future of tech track for that because I wanted to really, I just wanted to like systematically discover AI and virtual reality and machine learning and blockchain. And and during that time, I was just kind of exploring those frontier tech. And so what I built was I built a VR meditation app, which is like the most Boulder, Colorado thing that I've ever done. A VR hunting app, which is basically like you ever been in a bar and you played like Big Game Hunter? I've actually never been on a podcast and like Fonzie the audience, but like um, we made a VR like version of Big Game Hunter, which is pretty dope. I built an AI driven crypto app, which was called Pi
Oh,
Trader. I ran the Boulder blockchain meetup and I built a tool called AdBlock to Bitcoin, which basically just replaced AdBlock ad space where publishers are losing out on revenue with a QR code that solicited Bitcoin donations. Which like that was a crazy build. I built it at like 4 a.m. because I couldn't sleep and I put it on Hacker News and at like 9 a.m. a wired.com reporter was like emailing me. He was like, "Can I write about this?" And by the end of
oh
the day,
shit.
like completely like from conception to like in Wired magazine in like 9 hours. I built a tool called You've Got ETH, which allowed you to send ETH to any email address without having to have a private key. I did a brief stint with a blockchain hedge fund. And if you just look on my GitHub, there's like a trail of
All of that.
tears of
Yeah.
dead projects. So yeah, that's kind of how I engineered my way into the spaces just by trying shit and failing at it. The MVP of Gitcoin I started in May of 2017 and it like formally launched in September of 2017. So a lot of nights and weekends hours to get to where Gitcoin was.
One thing I like about your story is that you're literally at the intersection of community and technology, which is
Yeah.
basically all that crypto is. From running the blockchain meetup, right, and building
Yeah.
communities around that, to then freaking hustling your way and doing hobbyist projects on the side just to try to extract value or build value, ideas that were in your head. And then that led to the birth of Gitcoin slowly but surely. Can you walk me through more of like the origin story? So I know you mentioned a little bit back earlier, but walk me through, how did that come to life? How did you get into the public goods space and decide to
Sure.
do Gitcoin? Like, give me that entire story.
Yeah, for sure. Well, like I can sort of give you that stuff, but like the first thing I want to say is like the intersection of community and technology. I
Yeah.
think that the people who are going to win in this space are the ones who got into those things because those are ends in themselves. Like community is an end in itself, and if you're doing it as a means to an end, you will not be as successful as someone who is doing it as an end in themselves in
Mm,
itself. And I think that like what's cool is that those of us who have been doing community and technology just for the love of it have basically front run all of the people who are just getting in opportunistically because there's money here now. So I just think that's cool.
which,
Um,
by the way, is like how I got my start too. I got to start
yeah,
building communities on my college campus. I used to like, I
yeah,
read the Bitcoin white paper like what, in 2017, 2018, and then spent all
yeah,
of winter break trying to understand it, and then started writing in university Facebook groups. If anybody wants to learn about
yeah,
peer-to-peer payments on a Saturday at like 3
yeah.
p.m., I'm doing whiteboard sessions. So I really I really echo that.
Totally. But to actually answer your question, so Gitcoin's a place that you can get coins if you're a software developer. And
Right.
basically, there's two things that we're trying to solve that were both informed by my 10 years doing Web2 tech startups. The first was that I hired 45 software engineers during that time. I was a CTO, VP engineering, director of engineering. And engineers are like, they're, like, if you're an engineer, like you're the hot girl going to the dance. Like lots of people want to take you to the
Right.
dance, and it's because everyone needs engineers to build digital experiences. And one of the things that I learned was that the recruiting industry is this insane arbitrage between like on one side of things you have a $99 a month LinkedIn subscription, and on the other side of things you sell placements of engineers at companies for like 35K. So like just like figuring out how to recruit without an engine, without like having to rely on a recruiter was like a big eye-opening moment for me. And that was point number one, was like recruiters are intermediaries. How can we disrupt them? Was like part number one of Gitcoin. And then the
Okay.
second thing was that everything I ever built and everything most of us build is open source software. And open source is this just like beautiful expression of human speech where we're building our digital infrastructure and putting it out there for free, and there's no way to monetize it. And over the last 20 years, as Linux has beaten Microsoft in the cloud wars and open source is everywhere, a technologist like me, when I'm starting a new project, doesn't build his own database server, web server, networking stack. I use Linux, I use Postgres, I use Nginx, I use Python, and those are all available for free. It's this massive digital infrastructure that a study in 2014 said creates $400 billion per year in economic value. And the people who are working on that infrastructure are working nights and weekends because they can't get a job that does
Jeez.
open source that pays for that work. I think my kids are playing in the hallway. I'm gonna have to
Good
close my
morning.
door
Good
real quick.
morning.
Yeah,
Go
give me
for it.
one
Yeah.
sec.
Yeah, go for it.
All right, so yeah, my kids were just playing in the hallway, and I just had to go off screen for a second because I had to shut the door. But like, actually, like use that to make a point, which is like, for an engineer like me who's like 35, like I'm not 22 and just like vagabonding around the world anymore. Like I have a mortgage, I
Right.
have kids, I have like college to plan for. There's an systematic incentive for someone like me to go work at like JP Morgan Chase so I can pay my mortgage, as opposed to work on open source where I don't get any return for it. And so Gitcoin just recognized that there's a huge asymmetry between value created and value captured for open source software developers, and we want to correct that asymmetry. So, to actually answer your question, which was, what were the threads you were pulling when you started Gitcoin? It was disintermediating recruiters and funding public goods like open source software.
Got it. Kevin, I feel like that takes such a specific mindset, such a specific character and personality type. How would you kind of describe yourself to someone who's never met you? And like, why are you so passionate about this specific I wouldn't say niche because it's actually really, really big and the economic value that's generated through it is huge. But
Yeah.
I'm curious, like you're deciding to dedicate what feels like a lot of your life to building what you believe should be open source software and paying people accordingly to their contributions. Like, walk me more through that.
Um, It's a lot of directions I could take that question.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that like the ultimate opportunity that we have in this space is there's $2 trillion in an open source financial system, and the money that used to go to IT on Wall Street went to some back office on Wall Street. Now is being deployed on open source, and so there's just a huge opportunity to reinvent how open source is funded in the wake of that. But more generally, I think the interesting design space is that we now have programmable money and we can program our values into our money. And this is something that only like the Fed could do in the past. And now it's like open source and, everyday citizens can do it. And they should do it in a way that's moral and is compliant with the laws, of course. But I just think that design space is so huge because so many things rely on money. And I don't know. It's just like really a blessing to be able to work on that full time. If I was alive 100 years ago, I'd probably be doing manual labor, and instead I get to like tickle my brain every day as I'm trying to build Gitcoin, and it's hard, but it's really satisfying and self-actualizing to try to make a dent in the universe and hopefully guide the internet of money in a more regenerative direction. So I don't even remember what question you asked
No,
me.
my question is like, again, it takes a specific type of person to dedicate a lot of their time, a lot of their energy to this ethos, right? And you come again from the Web 2 world now into Web 3. You've been a
Yeah,
hobbyist, you've been building communities, you've been building software, you've gotten
I mean,
traction, let alone with Gitcoin. But again, it takes a certain personality to actually like lead that front.
yeah. Well, I mean, like, I don't know, like, what am I gonna do? Like, go get a corporate job or go work at fucking Ball Aerospace and like build
A
on
lot of
like,
fucking people do that.
yeah. Well, I mean, it's like here's the thing is like so what this actually is in an important. How old are you? You're like a couple years out of school.
24,
Yeah.
24.
Oh man, I was 24. I was young once. Um, I actually
Fresh
think
meat.
that like the path that I got on. So a lot of my friends from school, I went to a state school. I didn't go to like Stanford or anything like that. I went to
Okay.
Delaware. And one of the things that I saw with a lot of my like friends, is that when they worked in corporate America, they got addicted to the salary and the lifestyle of that. And
Right.
then when they started to have kids and have a mortgage, they knew they were climbing the wrong hill, but they have an obligation to be the breadwinner. And so they stay in corporate America because they're afraid of going down that hill and like being naked. Actually, I'm like
Yeah.
mixing my metaphors now, but like it's hard to get off the local maxima and climb the global maxima. And like
Mhm.
you feel very naked when you have like when you're the senior architect 3 at like Northrop Grumman and you have to get into open source where no one gives a fuck about your credentials. And one of the things that I just did from the start was like I was 23 starting a startup and jumping in the deep ends of startups, and I've always been climbing the startup hill like pretty much since college. And I think that there's a certain amount of like psychological safety that comes from just like always being on the market and always trying to hone my skills and always trying to create an impact.
Yeah.
And for people who are like, don't get used to the corporate like salary, and because then you'll never be able to do anything else. I think is like the way I got on this trajectory.
Yeah. Makes a lot of sense. What's up, guys? Adam Levy here. Sorry for the quick pause. I wanted to give some love to our 2 NFT sponsors that are making this episode a reality. They are Coinvise and Polygon Studios. On Coinvise, you can create a personal or community-owned social token on Ethereum or Polygon. Coinvise also helps you create incentives through token rewards and bounties, NFT business models, and bot integrations for Discord. Discover more today by visiting coinvise.co. Polygon Studios is the gaming and NFT arm of Polygon, who's focused on growing the blockchain gaming and NFT industry while bridging the gap between Web 2 and Web 3 gaming. The Polygon Studios ecosystem comprises highly loved blockchain games like OpenSea, Upshot, Avagachi, Zedrun, Skyweaver, Decentraland, and Decentral Games. If you're a gamer, builder, or NFT creator looking to join the Polygon Studios ecosystem, get started today by visiting polygonstudios.com. All right, back to the episode. I want to talk to you more about the incentive to build for open source. Can you walk me more through that? Of course, you're the whole marketing narrative is like at Gitcoin you can get coins, right? But what does
Yeah.
that really mean? Because projects they kind of like fundraise
Yeah,
to get funding, right, from different contributors that love the concept of open source software, that love the concept of
sure.
contributing and supporting the Ethereum ecosystem. But what's the incentive to build for open source?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that like, the status quo is that there's not much incentive other than like maybe you'll land a
Sure.
job at Google who will allow
Right.
you to contribute to open source 20% of your time. So there's an asymmetry between value created and value captured, and that's fundamentally what we want to change at Gitcoin is close that asymmetry between value created and value captured. And what that does is like if we can solve that problem, then what you do is that thousands of developers that worked at JP Morgan Chase or these private corporations can come work on the open internet and still pay their mortgage. Like that's the world that we want to build where Gitcoin's maximally successful, and we're not there yet. But yeah, like tangibly, what you can do on Gitcoin is that the ways we've figured out in order to monetize open source software developers is that we run virtual hackathons. So basically, if you're trying to contribute to crypto and you want to get paid for it, you can work on something in a virtual hackathon with the Ethereum Foundation, with Gitcoin itself, with several other DAOs in the ecosystem.
Hmm.
So that's like kind of a like I would almost say it's like a paid like a paid tour of the crypto ecosystem, and
Yeah.
and so that's virtual hackathons. We've also got this thing called Gitcoin Grants, which is the number one crowdfunding platform in the Ethereum ecosystem. And basically what it does is like you can crowdfund your contributions to pay for the work that you're already doing that supports open source software. So like hackathons are very good if you're just entering the ecosystem and you want to make a name for yourself. If you already have a name for yourself and you're already creating value, you can use grants.
Mm.
And in aggregate, those two products have delivered $51 million worth of funding to open source software developers over the last 3.5 years. And we're doing like
Wow.
$6 million per quarter. So it's not peanuts, but
Wow.
it's also not $500 billion per year, which is, the total market size if we're maximally successful. And then the third thing is that we've got this thing called Kernel, which is just basically like a Web3 university where we take 200 of the top new contributors to the ecosystem, the creme de la creme of the ecosystem, and we introduce them to ideas from Vitalik Buterin and Glenn Weil, and sometimes actually get them
Mm.
FaceTime with these people, and we usher them through. This is the philosophy and the ethos and the technology that you need to be successful in this space, and that's what Kernel is. So I'd say that I would consider Gitcoin to be like an Internet of Jobs application, but we're unbundling what it means to have a job. You are in a networked age, you're earning, you're learning, you're connecting, and maybe hiring other people. And I just believe that'll be peer to peer in the future as opposed to hierarchical as it was in a corporation in the past. So, yeah,
Yeah, that makes sense. So 52 million, okay, captured so far, and you said there's 400, 500 billion of value generated. What's
per
the
year.
plan to actually capture more of that per year?
Um,
And how do
so-
you like? How do you actually like? How does one actually capture all that value that's generated?
yeah.
You know what I mean? I feel like it's
Um,
one of your biggest challenges.
Totally. So, if you ever want to see our stats, go to gitcoin.co/results.
Okay.
Launch that page in 2017 when everyone had a flowery vision of how they're going to change the world, and Gitcoin was actually doing it. I was like, these are our stats, and it's updated every 3 hours. So, like, if you want to see our stats, check out gitcoin.co/results. But the question is like, how do we scale from doing six? Let's say there we go. Okay. Yeah, $52 million. You can see it's on an accelerating trajectory.
Yeah.
Like $6 or $9 million per quarter is what we're doing.
Crazy.
So yeah, I mean, like, we're just like our KPI is like number go up, but for public goods funding, not asset prices. And I think that the way that you do that is that you just build tools that allow crypto networks and ecosystem to allow people who want to contribute to them to contribute and to get coins for doing it. And so we're kind of moving from like being one of the biggest ecosystem builders in the Ethereum Foundation to launching this thing called Gitcoin Aqueducts, which is basically like if you're launching an NFT project or you're launching a DeFi product, you can take the technology that the Ethereum ecosystem uses to self-organize on Gitcoin, and you can just use it for your project. So Vitalik Buterin has called Gitcoin a significant pillar of the Ethereum ecosystem that some or all of the projects are using to rely on for support. And it's just taking that playbook and giving it to every DeFi project and NFT project that is
Right.
out there. And by the way, these all have like treasuries, like Uniswap has a $6 billion
Crazy.
treasury
Yeah.
now. So like, I think
Insane.
that's how you scale it up, is like you just provide the tools for people who are building open source ecosystems to get contributors into their ecosystem and retain them.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Which,
One Go ahead,
which,
go
by the
ahead.
way, like quick plug for anyone in the audience, if you're starting an NFT or DeFi project, please email me, Kevin@gitcoin.co, and we'll get you hooked up with a ecosystem building kit.
Oh, what does ecosystem building kit entail?
Um, right now, so we've got like a quarterly Gitcoin grants round, which is
Right.
we'll deploy $6 million per quarter, and there's like, I think of it as a series of circles. Like the main pot is the main circle, but we're trying to do is like bolt on side rounds. So like Polygon and Uniswap and Tally Cash all have side rounds on Gitcoin, and the ultimate, like, the thing that's powerful about that is that we're not just matching contributions to Ethereum open source, but also to these ecosystems open source projects. And
Mm,
if you email me, and if you have a project that has funding and is like legitimate, then we'll just add a side round every Gitcoin grants round for you. So the idea is that the whole point of what we're doing at Gitcoin is that people contribute to the public good instead of having to work on their own projects that have their own business models. And so the ultimate expression of this is that it's kind of it gives people the incentive to contribute to the public good of the Ethereum ecosystem or the Uniswap ecosystem or of your ecosystem by setting up these funding rounds on Gitcoin. So what we want to do is have like an ecosystem funding in the box kit where you just basically give a certain amount of your protocol revenues or your token supply to the Gitcoin matching pool, and we'll recruit people and organize your ecosystem building activities. So that's kind of how we're scaling what we're doing at Gitcoin, but also providing more utility to the ecosystem.
interesting. Okay, so beyond this developer or this toolkit that you guys are talking about, that you're talking about specifically, that you're using as a source to help up and coming NFT projects, how else do you see open source software development empowering like creators and related creative communities? Like, what does that look like? I feel like a lot of the focus is on developers and like
Yeah,
DeFi projects for the most part. I saw some educational projects on there as
yeah.
well. Can you walk me through more of the intersection between creators x Gitcoin?
Yeah, totally. I definitely start talking about Gitcoin. I started talking about software developers because I am a developer. Like,
Right.
I don't know if this is gonna be a video podcast, but like check out my
Yeah.
ponytail, proof of developer.
Pretty long.
But one of the things is like we started off wanting to really build and fund open source software, but now we've moved on to all digital public goods. So a public good is something that is non-excludable and non-rivalrous, which just means that like when I download an open source software repository, no one can stop me from doing that. And it's non-rivalrous, which means that Adam, if I download it, it doesn't stop you from downloading it because we can make infinite copies.
Right.
And those are digital public goods. And one of the things that we've kind of learned is that open source software is one digital public good, but there's also journalism, which is a public good. Like you reading an article and being informed about something does not stop
Right.
me. It's non-excludable, non-rivalrous. There is also, I think, like basically education is a public good for the ecosystem. I think that privacy is a public good, privacy technology. And so in TLDR, we're expanding from just software developers into designers and journalists and
Right.
educators
Okay.
and anyone who's contributing to the public good and not just software developers. And I just like, I need to get more inclusive in my language by talking about knowledge workers instead of developers. But
So, for
um
example, all these content creators on YouTube, on TikTok, etc., are
yeah,
technically a form of a public good, right? It's creating educational content, doing something for free for the betterment
yeah,
of society. I mean, they get paid. There's probably
yeah. And
incentives, but am I thinking about this the right way?
yeah, you are. And the huge thing here is that we're moving people away from having to rely on ads in order to make their living by doing crowdfunding. And, we use this mechanism called quadratic funding on Gitcoin, which I can get
Right.
into. But like ads create the ultimate perverse incentive where I just want to get as many eyeballs as possible. And so I will try to elicit an emotional response from you, whether it's positive or negative, in order to go viral and get more eyeballs on me so I can make more money. And what we
Hmm.
want to do is we want to shift the incentives from that incentive landscape to an incentive landscape of who's creating the most public good. And that is the big opportunity, I think, of the internet of money. The Web 2.0 is very based on ad models, and if we can move to a model that supports the public good in Web 3, I think that's going to create this like decentralized fractal of just like beautiful civic engagement and internet scale democracy that I think will just like be really beautiful looking back. But yeah, anyway, so like TLDR, if you're a content creator in the Web3 ecosystem, sign up for Gitcoin grants, and you can have a grant just like a software developer would, is like the tangible result of all these conversations.
Got it. Interesting. I know I recall in like other interviews, when I was doing some research more about you and more about Gitcoin, you talked about there was this happy marriage between journalists and developers in the Ethereum
Oh
ecosystem that kind of
yeah.
spurred a lot of the traction around public goods.
Mm.
Which I found was super interesting because, like you said earlier, like journalists are creators in their own respect, right? They are a very like lean definition of what a public good is, or contributing to open source knowledge, whatever you want to call it. Can you walk me through more about that story and what is that kind of like the synergies between
Sure.
journalists and developers and how that led to Gitcoin?
Totally. Yeah. Okay, so I kind of have to explain quadratic funding in order to answer that
Go for it.
question. And like,
Yeah,
I
let's
don't want to
do
go
it.
too deep. I'm going to try to do it in like 45 seconds or less. But
Go.
basically, the magic of Gitcoin grants is this thing called quadratic funding, which was invented by Glenn Weil, Vitalik Buterin, and Zoe Hitzig. I am just like kind of like they're the game theorists. I'm just like the hipster who makes it like neon and like gives you a web interface to use it. And the way quadratic funding works is that Adam, if you raise a grant that gets $100 from 100 contributors, and I raise a grant that gets $100 from one contributor, then basically what we're doing is we're running a matching campaign that matches all of the contributions to the crowdfunding campaign with a matching pool that is $3 million per quarter. And in that example that I just said, in a one-to-one matching, both of those grants would get $100 worth of matching. But in quadratic funding, what you do is you reward people who have more contributions from a wider set of personas. So in that example where you have $100 from 100 contributors and I have $100 from one contributor, we actually give like 98% of the
Got
matching
it.
pool to the one with the wider source of
Okay.
support. And so that's quadratic funding, and that's what powers Gitcoin grants. That's the mechanism that allows us to build and fund digital public goods in a decentralized way that optimizes for the preferences of the poor and the many instead of the rich and the few. And I think that's the magical thing is like you're getting supported based off of the number of your peers that think that you're doing a good job for the public good, not what some like power broker it thinks. And I think that's the magic of quadratic funding. Oh shit, now I forgot the question that you asked me. That was
No, this is good. This is on the right path. I'm
yeah.
talking about the story behind the intersection of journalists and developers and how
Oh
that kind of led to the rise
yeah.
of Gitcoin.
Yeah, so that mechanism works not only for open source software developers, but for journalism and privacy researchers and an educator, any public good it works for. And that's the magic of quadratic funding. And what we learned was that there's this problem where like software developers are not building and aggregating an audience. And so when they're running a quadratic funding matching campaign and we're optimizing for the preferences of the poor and the many people just don't know that they could be funding their digital infrastructure. And the perfect marriage. So we've run 12 rounds of Gitcoin grants and deployed about $40 million on Gitcoin grants. And one of the beautiful things that we saw around round 4 was that basically we were just funding open source software from rounds 1 through 3. And then we added a journalism round in round 4. And what that did was not only did it like cause some controversy because like some journalists are just like Twitter accounts, and it's like, is a Twitter account a public good is like a whole rabbit hole you could go down. But the tangible result was that the journalists have a big audience that they've aggregated, and they would tweet about their grant on Gitcoin, and then those people would come to Gitcoin, and they wouldn't just fund the journalist, but they would fund the open source software that was right next to it on the platform. And that was the key unlock, was that if you fund like there's a pluralism of different public goods, and if you support all of them all in one place, you support there's a network effect where it gets better the more public goods that you're supporting in one place. And one of the KPIs that we optimize for at Gitcoin is how do we get you to add more grants to your cart before you check out. So basically, instead of just supporting this one grant, how do we get you to support this one grant and then shop around and add all these other
Right.
different grants to your cart? And that's like a design goal that we have for Gitcoin. So yeah, that's actually how the journalism rounds support the educators, support the software developers, support the
Mm.
designers, all in one place.
So again, I bring this story up because a journalist is basically a creator. Like I consider a lot of what I do is very much like the foundation of journalism to an extent. So to hear that journalists got their start, or I guess Gitcoin got its start supporting journalists, that then led to software development, and the list goes on and on and on, is really interesting to hear. I guess my final question to you, Kevin, is what can society do to adopt more of a public goods mindset like yours, and how to actually more build with a public goods mindset?
I think awareness is the first step. That we just kind of have to break people out of this idea that there's this like mean reversion bias, which is, anything that's going to be discovered has already been discovered. And I like, it's like the classical game theoretic example of mean reversion is like a turkey who's like, everything is fine, everything will continue to be fine, and then on like day 800 of their life they get their head chopped off to be Thanksgiving dinner, right? That's like the ultimate like mean reversion thing. And like the thing that you see with web 2 people is that everyone just thinks that ads are going to continue to be the business model, and like sometimes subscription services. And the thing that I'm trying to encourage people to do is like, holy shit, let's climb off of that local maxima and find the global maxima. We now have programmable money. We can program our values into our money. And so let's build better ways for humanity to express its value than just like, do I want to click on this? Does this elicit a
Right.
dopamine rush and clickbait on me? So like the first thing to dislodging people I think the first thing is like dislodge people from this mean reversion bias that it's not even worth fucking trying doing anything other than playing your own rivalrous game. And I think that like once you've done that, then the question is, okay, what kind of like civilization do we want to live in? What values do we want to program into our money? And then you get into a place, and this is all very hard, right? Because you have to like leave your like safety of what works now, and you have to go explore. And like I started 7 fucking projects before I started Gitcoin, and I had the persistence to like be like a fish swimming upstream in order to build Gitcoin. And like not everyone wants to do that, but you
Yeah.
can hang out and vibe with the people who are doing that. And I think like, so my answer to that question is regenerative crypto economics. So how do we build a crypto economic infrastructure that has net positive externalities, and each individual project is an impact DAO, which has positive externalities on the world? And since I'm on your podcast, I'm going to really quickly shill my book, which is called
Let's
Green Pilled: How
go.
Crypto Can Regenerate the World. You can get it at greenpill.party. And what I want to do is I want to see 1,000 experiments blossom. This is not Gitcoin's story. This is all of our story. And I'm just aggregating it and talking about it in as many places as will have me. Is how do we build a regenerative crypto economic infrastructure from the world? But the first step is shaking people off of this mean reversion bias that it'll all just be web 2 and it'll stay the way it is, because the world is changing very quickly. And I think that we have to grab the bull by the horns and build a world that we want to live in. And to me, that's regenerative crypto economics. But people should launch their own experiments with their own hypotheses and see where that takes them.
I love it. Kevin, that's an awesome place to end off. I love your energy. Before I let you go, where can we find you? Where can we find more about what you're building? Give us the shill.
Yeah, totally. Google Gitcoin. We finally reached a place where Gitcoin does not, or where Google does not autocorrect Gitcoin to Bitcoin. So yes, we've done it.
Nice.
The If you search for Kevin Owocki, Owocki, you can find me. I'm mostly active on Twitter. I oscillate between thought leadering and memeing and shit posting on Twitter, which is
Yeah,
kind of fun to just like vibe with people
I can back
on
that.
Twitter. And yeah, I think you and I got connected on Twitter DMs.
Yeah.
And then if you're coming to East Denver next week, we're gonna be hosting a 1-day mini conference about regenerative crypto economics and all of these themes. It's gonna be called Shelling Point.
Nice.
So yeah, come to Shelling Point if you're out at East
That's on a
Denver.
Thursday, right?
Yeah, Thursday, 2/17. I don't know when this will air,
Yeah,
but if it's before that, come to
it
Shelling
will
Point.
be.
If it's
It'll be
not, check
before
out the
then.
Shelling
Yeah.
Point videos. And Vitalik Buterin speaking, Trake from Coordinape is speaking, Audrey Tang, the digital minister of Taiwan, is speaking, Glenn Weil is speaking. We got
Wow.
a stacked lineup, and what I'm trying to do is create a Schelling point for the hopeful, people who want to use crypto to rebuild our institutions in a more digital native way. And so it's the aggregation of all of the community, not just Gitcoin, that's doing this. But if you want to get involved, send me a tweet at twitter.com/Owocki, and we'll get you plugged in.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Kevin. Hope to have you again soon.
Peace and love. This was fun.